we've entered into territories that I was personally uncomfortable with over the years, and that dancing, longboard dancing, is a case in point. We had one of our ambassadors, Adam Colton. He was a filmmaker. He was one of the we were the biggest brand on YouTube and biggest skateboard brands on YouTube in 2006 to probably 2008, and that was first and foremost due to him making all these videos. But he was really into longboard dancing, which is like modern freestyle on these, at that point, 70-inch boards, these huge boards. And I thought it was kind of kooky and bizarre, but it's something he was passionate about. And to like walk through that process with him and build what he wanted. And now it's a phenomenon, especially in Europe and Asia. It's starting to happen here in the US. There was a Lexus ad with this one of these Korean girls who's doing these amazing board walking. We've got these riders in especially Lotfi Lamali in Paris who does just incredible freestyle tricks. And it's really 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 amazing where that's gone and where it's going, and it's dynamic and it's changing. Hi, I'm Don Tashman, Director of Direction at Loaded Boards, and you're listening to Behind the Brand with Brian Elliott.
Nice. Don, I usually ask my guests, how did you get this job?
Serendipity, I'd say, first and foremost. I grew up skateboarding in Los Angeles, fell in love with snowboarding in the late 80s, early 90s, went to college in New York in the mid 90s, and studied literature and astronomy, but spent most of college building skateboards as a way to get around New York City. I then, this is short story long or long story short, not quite sure, but ended up traveling a lot for a number of years. Ended up back in New York in the late 90s working for a .com. Had a number of different jobs, just kind of all over the place. Had a hard time coming out of college when trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And my dad would always tell me, just get a job. I was like, how do I get a job if I don't know what I want to do? And he's like, no, you get a job in order to figure out what you want to do. So ended up at a .com in 99 at the, as the whole internet, the initial .com boom was happening. Very much right place, right time. Had a lot of fun, traveled all over the world, working for kind of a precursor to Skype and Zoom, effectively. And then, but ended up bouncing around, starting off at that company, starting off in sales, getting into marketing analysis, tech, and then from there, moved back to LA where my dad had a clothing company, and I had gotten a bunch of stock options and did relatively well for a 25-year-old, and used that money to start a skateboard clothing company, which I did for a couple months. Which I recognized pretty quickly. I mean, at that point, I'd been building my own skateboards for about 6-7 years. Never really thought of it as a business. It was always just something I was passionate about. My dad was very, very adamant that I study either business or engineering. And once again, I studied literature and astronomy, pretty much to spite him. And here I am today doing business and engineering. And I love it. So.
Yeah, so you did it the right way. You did it probably how every parent dreams their kid will do it. You got a real job first instead of, pursued a path of professional skateboarding or something like that, like a lot of the other Groms will do. You got a real job, you made some money, and then you got into skateboarding. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, my dad was he was a tremendous inspiration for me. Especially after working with him. Him and I had a very different view of things, and we used to bang heads a lot when I was a kid, and I didn't really understand him. But he said when I quit my job in New York for the .com, he said, come work with me, and you can work with me part-time. He was making cheesy Hawaiian shirts at that point, which I'd grown up designing and being involved in. But he's like, work for me part-time and I'll give you an office space to do your own thing. But he encouraged me very much to to learn how to do things, to work for other people, to have these experiences first. And then when I came and worked for him, it within a matter of months, it was really him working for me, and he became my CFO. He ran the business side. I was doing the creative side, and I really was very inspired. I mean, just I really started to understand him as a person much more than I'd ever done, because this was experiencing him in the environment that he was most passionate about, which was his work environment, which was very much where he expressed himself as a creative and and I'd say ethical human, and that was very important to him, to be very straight in his dealings, as he would describe it. And him and I banging heads for all these years, or not really understanding each other, working with him, having that opportunity to work with him for 7 years until he passed was a tremendous blessing. It was really an amazing opportunity for me, both in terms of understanding him and to have someone there who was like unconditionally supportive of me, who thankfully didn't, as an immigrant, didn't really understand skateboard culture, which probably was a blessing. So he didn't. I don't think he understand. I definitely know he didn't understand the nuances of the culture, because I'm not sure he would have been as encouraging of it as he was. But he was tremendously encouraging throughout the process, which is an interesting contrast to my mom. My mom I mean, she'll still get on a skateboard, but she started skating as a little kid. She would she grew up here in LA, moved here when she was 4, and she would take old roller skates and convert them into skateboards. And so my siblings and I all grew up with a skateboard around the house. And like I said, she'll still get on a skateboard, which is terrifying, but obviously has been a huge inspiration.
So a lot of people don't know about the loaded board's history, origin, or even the fact that you were really the ghost in the machine for another brand called Boosted back in the day. Can you tell that story a little bit?
Sure. So, well, I'll tell from the beginning. We in early 2000, when I moved back to LA, we launched our first boards in 2002, and I put them. I bought a Jeep with the money I made from the .com, and I drove up and down the coast selling skateboards. And one of the shops that we opened was a shop that's no longer in existence, but a shop. Shoot, I don't remember, Black Diamond Sports, and they were right outside of Stanford, like literally outside the gates of Stanford. And they sold boards to the guys from Boosted, when the guys in Boosted were doing a master's program in robotics, to Sanjay and Matt and John. And Constantine over there we were close with, and he introduced us to those guys when he saw that they were working on a project to develop an electric skateboard. This must be around 2014, and 13, 14, they came to us at that point and said, "Hey, we're really interested in using your boards and your wheels for what we're doing." And we worked with them very closely for a number of years, developing, helping them develop decks and wheels, and just also trying to be involved in their business. I'm personally very avid. I have a tremendous amount of interest in electric vehicles and in micromobility. Always have, and I think it's and as we're seeing right now, in this kind of hopefully post-COVID world, it's such a fascinating space.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it's funny that little how small the world is, right? Because it was Matt actually who reached out to me, and I feel like it was more like 2012 that I met Matt as he was developing the booster board. He came out here to Southern California. At the time, I was running my little production company, but I also had sort of a side hustle, which was I formed this action sports network of all of my past former action sports relationships, people I'd worked with over the years, from Billabong, Quicksilver, Hurley, Volcom, etc. Down here where I was living where I am living, is the mecca of action sports. And Matt came down because he knew I had this community of like 10,000 people in this little private network. And he's like, hey, we're launching this board and we want some help kickstarting it. And you want to check it out? And so he came down, he showed it to me. I rode around the parking lot, and I was hooked. And I feel like it was a loaded deck, like it was a bamboo deck and super flat.
It was it, it was a loaded deck. The original board was done on a board that they bought from Black Diamond. I don't. You may be right on the date. It may be earlier. But yeah. It could be.
It could be. I may
Well,
be mistaken.
and
Yeah.
so, and I won't take all the credit, but I'll take some of the credit because we did help promote that board because I was super stoked on it, and it was like the funnest thing I ever ridden at the time, and you know, helped promote it through the group several times. Their Kickstarter campaign obviously was wildly successful, and then we sort of kept in touch over the years, and I eventually went up to Mountain View and I did the boosted board story on Behind the Brand all those years ago. Anyway, so I had no idea that you were really behind a lot of it, all the hard goods, sans the engine, but like you were the deck, the trucks, the wheels, all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that we also were influential in some of the strategic thinking. They ended up going in a slightly different direction and going for. I had originally wanted to kind of incorporate them in our brand and do it together, which history shows may have been a good idea. But that's for each of us to decide. But it was a fascinating time. They ended up going into much more of the venture capital side and trying to build something a lot larger. But they did amazing things. I mean, it was really, really incredible.
It was a whole movement, and they were a pioneer in the sort of electric skateboard. I mean, they were the one, and they did it right for a long time. But talk about now how you're sort of taking or picking up where they left off and moving forward, because Loaded is not an electric skateboard company. I mean, to me, you're one of the last great independent skateboard brands. There's been a lot of consolidation in the industry, but you guys are really one of the last independents. Talk about the Loaded brand and what it means, what it stands for, and what you guys are doing.
I appreciate that. Yeah, you phrase it like that. I think there's a lot of truth to that. So we ended up parting ways with Boosted in the end of 2018 and teaming up with a company in Barcelona, Unlimited, who had this modular structure, a modular system, and we continue to work with them. But we've recognized that our expertise and our forte is much more on the mechanical side. We've historically, our history is taking snowboard construction and snowboard technology and applying it to skateboards, and that's where we brought some innovation into skateboarding with other influences. I won't take all the credit by any means, but that was definitely our approach, and it continues to be. I think the mechanical side for me is very.
Does this relate like to the flexibility of the boards, or is it like longboarding as a sport in general? Like, what are you talking about when you get your influence from snowboarding?
Yeah, so both.
Yeah, so both. I think that the longboarding as a sport, really started to grow in the late '90s. You had Sector 9 and Gravity at that point in San Diego. You had a number of people doing things in Switzerland, but kind of in a little bubble. But very little else was happening. And the whole concept of skateboarding as a method of transportation and downhill and carving and all these things that weren't street or vert was completely unheard of at that point. And to me, coming from snowboarding, to me that made a tremendous amount of sense. And I just didn't really, it didn't compute to me why it hadn't been embraced. And on that note, like the concept of flexibility, I had spent 7 years taking old snowboards and cutting them up and turning them into skateboards, and seeing how that flexibility and that kind of that preloading, hence the name Loaded, of creating these cambers, these dynamic structures, how that could be used to create these really engaging, visceral rides and experiences.
One of the obvious obstacles to letting like the sport with quotes of longboarding go super mainstream is obviously it's very dangerous. If you're going at high speeds, we're talking 30, 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, right? At some times, and you got these riders, these pros, with basically hockey pucks on their the palms of their hands, and they're all protective gear. They're flying down S turns and hairpins, and that's one side of it. The other side of it is me, like on a Sunday afternoon, cruising down, the boardwalk with the kids and just having the best time of my life. Wind in my hair, going to get some fish tacos or something.
So I mean, I think I've personally been on kind of both sides of that. I think that for me, it's a very much of a soulful experience. I like that what I would call soul carving. That's very much what I am attracted to. I'm not a like balls to the wall speed demon by any means, but we mainly through so we have two brands, Loaded and Orangutan being our other brand. And Orangutan is our whale brand, and it's right now, if I do say so, it's probably the biggest soft whale brand in the world. And we've used that brand. I mean, that brand was a big influence and stimulus on all the downhill freeride stuff that you see, all the videos we did. We A lot of those videos that in riding down Malibu and stuff is something that we promoted heavily. We were very adamant about safety gear and helmets because, like you're saying, it is inherently dangerous. Um,
Yeah, but the boards are built. I mean, they come out of the box built for any skilled rider. You could be a super legit pro or a Sunday cruiser. It's the same board.
that's a good question because in some sports, I think it's true in skateboarding on some levels as well. But maybe like in biking as a good analogy. In bike riding, if you ride if you're a road biker, let's say, and you're riding a $3,000 carbon fiber board, a carbon fiber bike, it's quite a bit more engaging and interesting, even for a beginner rider. So I think there is something to the technology to creating board products that are uh, that are applicable to a wide variety of people. So we do build for the pros, but we also there's certain downhill products where it really is very focused, very niche. But I'd say our average board, we've always tried to go for the gold or platinum standard for the best possible riding experience.
Talk about the brand because I think it is very unique. You guys are one of the last great independent board brands, but also you have a mission and care and love for the environment, and that's also kind of rare.
Sure. Well, our mission as a brand is very much to spread Stoke. And I'd say that's first and foremost, and that's been clarified over 20 years and some really amazing people that have come through here. So first and foremost, we're here to just spread Stoke externally to to really to fuck with people a little bit and have them push back at us, if I can say that. Uh, and I'd say that uh, that that informs a lot of the way we approach and perceive our brand identity, the types of products we build. We've been very much focused on environmental sustainability from the beginning. First and foremost, on a individual level, I want the all our products to be non-toxic in the materials we're using. Right now, we've transitioned almost all of our products to bio-based epoxies, non-toxic finishing, everything from start to finish. But it's still a work in process. I mean, there's still. I'm not going to say that we are green. I don't want to greenwash it by any means, but it's very much part of that broader ethos of trying to spread Stoke. I mean, on a global level.
And I guess maybe I want to just take the opportunity for the listeners who are maybe who have their own brands or are thinking about building a brand. I think this is the major difference and flexibility you have. And let's compare it to the case study of Boosted Boards, which is now defunct and out of business basically. And that is they had to answer to stakeholders, shareholders, and perhaps they had to make financial decisions, not ethical or value-based decisions, like you guys are doing. That's one of the benefits, right, to being independent. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not as profitable as you'd like it to be, caring about the environment, using certain materials that don't destroy the earth. But at the same time, you can look yourself in the mirror, wake up in the morning, and you sleep really well, right?
We made some interesting territory here. Yes, very much. When it comes down to it, it's like, well, why do we do it? I'm definitely feel very blessed to be in the position that I'm at right now and to do what I do. And we talk a lot about internally how the love that we have between us is experienced and reflected in the products that we put out there. And that the kind of culture that we're creating and internally is and the way we're running our business is an experiment, is an ongoing experiment. Thankfully, a successful one, 20 years deep. But I do feel very blessed to have been in a position to build this company without any stakeholders, without having to be, I guess, subservient to our shareholders and to make decisions. One thing that I found that very interesting, as I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, so I'm not going to point fingers, but working with a number of companies that have been in the venture capital world, there tends to be a sense of almost self-righteousness that occurs when you have to answer to your shareholders, in the sense that that's my experience, at least, in that you make decisions that aren't necessarily based on your values and ethics, and you end up making decisions that I just read an interesting article on GE, by the way, about this. That was the downfall of GE. I don't know if you've seen this, but how GE, they were the right, they were the original blue, what's it called, the blue chip stock, right? Because GE had their fingers in everything. They were so successful, but because they were so dependent on they were so dependent on hitting the goals that they set out for their shareholders, that they made decisions. I mean, I don't have, I speak of this. I don't know that I have a lot of knowledge of this, but I've seen this happen a number of times where you make decisions either to retain your power, to hit your goals that aren't necessarily in line with your values. And to be able to remain independent, I think is not only it's a virtue, but it's something that's not talked about enough. I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think a lot of people see growing a new business, a startup, that's kind of the necessary steps, is to go out to other people, to go out for money. And often it is. Often you do need money to make money, obviously. But it doesn't mean that it is, finding the right partners is incredibly important if you are going to find partners. And we've seen that. We've seen those who have made the right decisions and found the right partners who've given them the leeway to do what's best for the brand. We've seen this in one of our competitors over the past few years, who they've changed hands a couple times, and in order to hit the numbers, they had to make some decisions that weren't good for the long-term growth of the brand. And the brand was one of the premier brands in our space, and has fallen by the wayside because of those kinds of decisions. So it may have worked for a number of years, but we're here and they're not, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's a super valuable lesson, totally worth a lot of in-depth study and reflection. I mean, look at another case study that's very successful. I think Apple is a company that's had a lot of problems, but they've tried to stay true to their core values. And, at this point, they're $1 trillion company. And they're not innocent of bad behavior. There's a lot of bad behavior and terrible things, I'm sure, that are happening, whether you want to talk about the labor force in other countries, whether they're underpaid or, not treated well. Apple has a lot of problems, but at the same time, to me, they're a standout company that's tried to live their core values. Another, cliche case study would be Nike, right? Nike, again, lots of problems. I'm sure it has its share of hypocrisy, but also, as you think about what a brand stands for, and I guess it's the lesson I'm trying to extract here is when you're building a brand, when you think about your brand, it starts with your core values, your core beliefs. What do we believe in? And then if you could stay that course, I think you have a much better chance of success because you're staying true to your instincts. It really comes down to being self-aware of what you're trying to accomplish and what your people want. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I agree in general, but I think that there requires a level of flexibility. What I described as our core values about spreading Stoke was not an initial. It was everyone's initial value coming into this, but it wasn't something that we could clarify or we can state as clearly as I just did. It's something that we developed over time, trying to understand who we were in and of ourselves, and who we were in relationship to our competition, relationship to the broader world, has been something that continues to adapt, and it's not something I'm locked into. I've just found the most meaning in trying to be a force for good. I mean, and like I said, it's spreading Stoke. That's really the broader value, and how that's defined. We do break it down internally quite a bit, but how that's defined is something that's a continuous work in process. And I agree with you about Apple. It's interesting because I had a lot of issues with Apple over the past 20 years personally, just because of the way they structure their systems. And I was a big fan of Google for a long time with the whole "don't be evil" approach. But I do feel like as they got so large, I feel like there's probably a lot of there's clearly a lot of complexity and a lot of self-awareness coming from these big brands, but there's also a level of like having to meet these goals and to do anything to meet these goals. The kind of absolute power corrupts absolutely nature of it, which is highly unfortunate. But I've seen it. I mean, I hate to say this on the record, but I've been very disappointed by what I've seen from Google over the past few years. They were a huge inspiration for our brand over the years, especially in the early days. Actually, a little interesting anecdote. When they first came out with Google Shopping, they put our boards there. Marissa Mayer put our boards there as the first one of the things you could purchase. But what we did is around that same time, we put when they first started doing banner ads, we put a banner ad on every page of our website, and we say, if you click on this banner, we'll take this money and create product and give it back to the community. And didn't really think through the implications of that. Google got a little upset about that, and they banned us from doing banner ads. That rightfully so, but the intentions are pure. So
Yeah, a little guerrilla marketing there. Yeah, and I was just thinking, I guess, the bigger, I'm thinking of a ship analogy, the bigger the ship, the more distance it requires to make a turn, right? So you got these giant ships, Google, Apple, Nike, and their North Star, their compass, whatnot, is set to their true north, which is their core values. But still, to make turns and maneuvers is much more difficult. It takes more time these days. I was talking to Marty Neumeier, who's an author, probably, he's like one of the pioneers of branding. He actually did a lot of design work for Apple, Hewlett Packard, Kodak back in the day. And Marty, has written several books on branding. And he was discussing with me, taking me to school on what a brand is and what it isn't. And he was reminding me, he said, as much as we want to think that we control the brand, we don't. A brand is not your logo. And a brand is not the promotion or advertising. It's not even the awareness that exists because of your company. It's not any of these things. A brand is really what exists in the hearts and minds of the people who you come in contact with. So at all these touch points, whether it's online buying skateboards or in a board shop picking up, new trucks and wheels, like this is where your brand is built. And if you have 100 customers or 1 million customers, you might have 100 or 1 million different like impressions or uh, like perceptions of what your brand is. And so all that you could do is try and live your core values, your core beliefs, so that it aligns with what really people think about you, you know?
So on that note, interestingly, so we've been thinking about this a lot and talking about this a lot. The way we defined the way we presented our brand, like you're saying, there's a million different touch points, but the way we presented our brands over the years was very much of a black box. Like there was a black box, and there was a couple people that would be representative, and those were we tried to like mitigate your touch points over the years. And now, maybe it's the nature of modern social media, but it's also nature, also where we are in our maturation. I'd say we're looking at the human aspect, like who are we? How do we interface directly, all of us individually, and how do we create these channels of interaction between us? And that's been a big focus of our branding efforts over the past 6 months and very much into the future is how do we take each of us individually and put ourselves out there. Doing this is a case in point.
When you're designing, who are you thinking about? Who's the muse? Is there one person? Is it a male, a female? Is it, like who, how do you design?
That's a great question. And that's changed a lot over time. Generally, well, not generally. The way we design currently is we will have one person internally on our team, possibly two at the maximum, and myself will get together, and it will be how do we realize your vision? Like this, let's realize your vision is an entirety. Let's not make something that's watered down. Let's not try to hit multiple people. And if it hits, it hits. But if this is something that you really believe in and really care about, you're going to be ambassador for it. You're going to drive it. So, but also like this is going to be real to what it is. We've had multiple instances where we've had too many cooks in the kitchen on the design level, and nobody ends up happy with the outgoing product. But right now, building based on what people are personally passionate about, we've been lucky. I don't know if it's because of the nature of the I'd say wonderful people that we have here, but like we build for ourselves first and foremost. We build for what we want. And if we have someone who really has a clear vision of whatever it might be, and I really, we've entered into territories that I was personally uncomfortable with over the years, and that dancing, longboard dancing is a case in point. We had one of our ambassadors, Adam Colton. He was a filmmaker. He was one of the we were the biggest brand on YouTube and biggest skateboard brands on YouTube in 2006 to probably 2008, and that was first and foremost due to him making all these videos. But he was really into longboard dancing, which is like modern freestyle on these at that point 70-inch boards, these huge boards, and I thought it was kind of kooky and bizarre, but it's something he was passionate about, and to like walk through that process with him and build what he wanted. And now it's a phenomenon, especially in Europe and Asia. It's starting to happen here in the U.S. There was a Lexus ad with this one of these Korean girls who's doing these amazing boardwalking. We've got these riders in especially Lotfi Lamali in Paris who does just incredible freestyle tricks. And it's really, really, really amazing where that's gone and where it's going, and it's dynamic and it's
Well, so there's
changing.
that flexibility that you're talking about, to expand the vision or broaden your horizon in terms of your core values.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I build a lot for myself personally, and most of the times that works, not always, but it is about finding the right people who really have a clear vision um, of what they're looking for, and then working with them. I was mentioning Mark Rober earlier. I took this monthly class with him on engineering with my daughter, and it's something that I've been employing a lot in my team over the past year about how we do our whole design process, our whole design methodology, and it's a really robust design methodology, and it starts on a very high level. What is it conceptually that we're looking at? What are we trying to achieve? What are the multiple ways that we can go about it? Not jumping to conclusions, and it's very very fun. And even since you were here last year, you first of all, you're always welcome back. But we've made a lot of changes here and we can build boards from start to finish in 3 days, effectively about 8 hours. In about 3 days, we can build from concept to rideable prototype in house right now.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really awesome, actually.
So as we sort of round third, come bring it home, maybe impart some wisdom to people who are thinking about building a brand, starting a company with a new product or service, kind of, either up and comers, side hustlers, or people, wanting to try this for the first time. What advice would you give?
Well, um, a number of things. It's not romantic, but I would say first and foremost, build a budget and forecast. Really understand your numbers, understand your costs. I was very blessed to have my dad help me along through the beginning of the business. But when he passed, I was really forced to kind of make some hard decisions. And at that point, I'd build my first budget, and that's really, I'd say that's the keystone of our success, is to really understand what our costs are, to really understand. That's like I said, it's not romantic, it's not exciting, but it really understanding what the costs are, understanding how to make this work financially.
Have you ever been tempted to take outside money?
Numerous times. Yeah, we've looked at that quite a bit, but I've never wanted to let go of control, and I've always been scared. I wouldn't say no to it. It just would really require, one of the things, as we were talking about earlier, I think it would really require the right partner. Thankfully, we've been in a position where we don't need it, where we've been able to be self-sustaining. But I would definitely say that would be something that I would encourage people to try to achieve, is to be self-sustaining if they can, and not have to go to outside money if possible.
I'm just curious. This is just me going into Fantasyland for a second. So if you, Don, could step outside loaded for a month and maybe take 2 weeks or something to step into the founder CEO role of another brand, where would you like to step into to take the helm for a couple of weeks?
Oh, that's fascinating. Um, yeah, I've been trying to do a lot of mentoring recently, like working with a number of startups and trying to help them with their processes, particularly with budgeting and the numbers. But where would I personally be interested in exploring? Well, there's so many fascinating things right now. I'd say right now I'm continuing to be very interested in electric vehicles. So there's a number of electric vehicle companies that really
Give me specifics. Go out on a limb. Tell me the brand you'd like to step into.
Well, I definitely want to go to space. I mean, Jeff Bezos finally validated himself with his desire to go to space by himself. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I definitely have always wanted to go to space, so that's pretty cool. But that's not where. So yeah, maybe Blue Origin. But aside from that, I would say it would probably be something. Uh, it'd probably be one of the smaller electric vehicle companies. I'd say Trek would be a company that would not. It's not such a small vehicle company by any means, but John Burke has been is an inspiration, in the way he runs his company. I would love to do a tutelage under him for a little bit, more than running something like that. I'd also love to like be at the helm of a company like. I know it's very much in my space, but something like One Wheel or Super 73 or some of these, those would be super fun to like see where they're at and see what kind of decisions they're making right now, and be able to help guide from from an outside perspective right now. Those would be some brands that would inspire me. Yeah, other brands that really inspire me a lot. I would say, I mean, obviously, Patagonia has been something. We've had a relationship with them over the years, and they've been a big inspiration for us in terms of both environmental stewardship and also the way they approach their employees and the way they approach their whole their culture.
Exemplary brand, living their values, right? Wasn't it Patagonia that decided to basically what's the brand? Maybe I've got it wrong, but they did something where they like said we're not working on Black Fridays anymore, or something like that.
That was Patagonia. Yeah, that was Patagonia. REI did it as well, but both of them did. We're paying for our employees not to work on Black Friday. Very much putting their money where their mouth was.
I mean, we were just sitting back, you know, chopping it up, reminiscing about the good old days and all that. You know, tracking my roots, where I came from and where I'm going. But like I say, man, always said it. It's not about the destination. It's all about the journey. Ain't nothing changed but the weather. The dangling carrot that hang from the rear view.